Hello and welcome to episode 127 of Authors Afterword. On this podcast, I talk to an author about one, occasionally more, of their books in detail. And if you find yourself enjoying today's episode, do share it with your friends. So, I'm Charlie Place, and joining me today is Emily Slapper, author of Everyone I Know Is Dying, a fantastic book about mental health and all the pressures our society puts on people. Iris has slept with her boss and, to sum it up, liked that she was younger than his wife. She is in a job where she feels the need to look perfect, be perfect, and her friendship with Sara is both perfect and it feels fake. Then Iris gets the promotion she was hoping for, and suddenly her life unravels. She quits her job and starts spending most of her time in bed. She does start a relationship with her flatmate, George, and he is kind and doesn't push her, but her mood does not improve, and she starts looking for joy she's missing elsewhere. Hello, Emily.
Hi, thanks for that. That was a great introduction.
Yeah, it's been phenomenal reading your book. I have really enjoyed it. I would like to ask you, going back to the start, I suppose, can you tell us the inspiration and why you wanted to write this book?
I think the first thing that really made me want to write it was that I'd seen a lot of films or read a lot of books where the kind of plot followed that it was someone living a very superficial, shallow life where they just cared about their appearance or their job or, not the deeper things in life, and that made them not feel good. And then the kind of moral of the films or books tended to be that, like, when they found true love, then finally they were fulfilled and everything comes together and their life has meaning and they feel great then. And even though that probably is the case for a lot of people, I kind of thought that sometimes that can be a bit of a dangerous idea for some people, depending on what kind of point of your life you're in or what kind of frame of mind you're in, that love can be this cure for basically what you're feeling. And so even though that isn't just the only theme of the book or anything, that was definitely the starting point of just thinking, even if a relationship is actually really amazing and love is true and the people really care about each other, can that really give your life enough meaning to make you happy?
That's really interesting because I really, really liked what you did with the romance and how you explored things in that context. But I wouldn't have thought it was the inspiration.
Yeah. It's funny because I know that I remember after getting the book deal and stuff and hearing other people start speaking about it for the first time, I realized that it wasn't the main thing that people were picking out about it. And I know that there is other big parts of the book, but that was just the original, because as I said, I didn't plan out the book or plot it out. Some of the other themes just came in more naturally, but that was the first thing that was in my mind while I was starting to write it.
Fascinating. Okay, well, I'm going to ask about George and Patrick later, so we will go back to that. What kind of research did you do writing this book?
None. Yeah, no research. It was just, as I say, writing it out by hand and just letting it come out of my mind. And then maybe after I finished it in the editing process, there was a lot more thoughtfulness behind trying to structure it or making decisions that to make it feel more like a book that is readable. But yeah, not any research.
Goodness. Okay. Right. All natural. Goodness. Okay. Yeah. Right. Well, okay. I'm going to ask a follow-up that I think you're going to say no, but let's see. So you mentioned the bell jar at the start.
Yeah.
And I was wondering before that came in, did this influence the book at any point or any of the strands?
I put that in the book as a little salute because that is very inspirational to me, that book. And that was a very impactful book for me to read. And I realized while I was writing this book that it would be crazy almost not to reference it because it is so inspirational to me in that way. So yeah, that is definitely a big inspiration for the book.
Okay. I want to ask you, was this the first book you had written? I presume you've written other things before.
No, this was the first thing I've ever written. So I didn't, it's one of those things where I haven't been these people that have written their whole life. When I look back on my childhood, I was writing, I did enjoy doing creative writing and stuff, but then there was a big gap in the middle. And basically I wanted to be a writer director of films. And that was my original aim or desire. So in the way I was writing that kind of stuff, but this was the first fiction that I'd ever written.
Yeah. Okay, so you've got that double sort of influence in film in that you were watching films and also, yeah, that was something that you had kind of come from. Yeah.
Yeah, I did
Mm.
that at undergraduate. I did cinema and photography as my undergraduate degree, and I really wanted to be like a director, writer. That was like the complete aim. And then I graduated and realized, wow, to make a film, you need a lot of people and money and time and equipment and just like organization. And as a 20-year-old with like no contacts, it just felt very overwhelming. So I started working in advertising for a bit and then realized actually you can just with a pen and paper, like create a whole world and you don't need any money or other people. And when I started writing it, I just felt very like natural to me in the way that I just really enjoyed it and felt very fulfilling to just be able to do that without actually having to organize anything. Because I actually, looking back on it, I don't think I actually would make an amazing director, to be honest, because that is an extremely difficult job to do.
Yeah, no, it's definitely difficult. Different to
Yeah.
writing as well. Yeah. I kind of want to see an adaptation of your book, though. Maybe you could,
Oh,
do
well, that
something
would
in
be
there that way.
yeah. I would love that. But
Yeah.
it's funny because sometimes people say, like, do you see it like being adapted? Or, and even though I would love that, funnily enough, as someone coming from the background of like wanting to write films, it doesn't feel very like there isn't a lot of plot or even just like description of what is visually going on is so in her own head that I'm like, oh, I wonder if it would actually be adaptable in that way, but I still would love to see it.
No, that's a fair thing to say. Yeah, there is a lot of that, and it would have to be translated kind of out of her head. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to move on to the first line, because wow. So the first line for listeners, anyone who hasn't, who doesn't mind spoilers, who's here and would like to know, it's, I hope the lights are on when we finally have sex, so he can see how young I am compared to his wife. Oh my goodness, that is one of the best I've ever read. I want to ask you about writing this line and including it as the first one.
It's funny because actually it was always in the first like page or so. It was in the first like scene. And then like in editing, I was like, that should just be the first line because like it really just sums up everything in the first line that I want to say and set up the scene in that way. So I moved it to the front and then it just made so much sense because I wanted the reader to come in knowing what Iris was like straight away rather than gradually getting an idea.
Well, I know that through my own interpretation, my first feeling of her before I ever learnt to empathise with her, I thought she was an awful person.
Yeah.
Was that was something you were aware of and working with then?
Yeah, and to be honest, I think a lot of people think that even at the end, or like it's such a spectrum on how people respond to the book that in how far they feel compassion or like empathy towards her, in the way that sometimes people just find her unforgivable in every way. And sometimes there's a bit more of like this mixed emotion towards her. But definitely at the beginning, I think it's very hard to feel anything positive towards her.
Do you have an opinion yourself or a feeling of how you feel towards her? I know you're the writer, so it might feel a bit different, but
Yeah, that's an interesting question, actually. I feel a lot of empathy towards her, and probably like more than the average person, especially because I've just spent so much time with her, and I feel like I could write about a murderer and feel like empathy towards them because I just have to be so much in their head and story. But I also think that what I wanted to write about and explore was this grey area about how being mentally ill can actually not make you necessarily the best version of yourself and in that way impact the other people in your lives, and how far are we willing to forgive people for the things that they do when they're not feeling great. Yeah, so I think I'm more on the side of thinking we don't need to like excuse people's behavior, but like we can feel sympathy for them. And I actually think that coming towards these situations with sympathy actually in the long run end up helping people rather than just being like, they're evil, they've done a bad thing, and we will never forgive them for it. I think that's just an unhelpful way to see things.
yeah, certainly. Yeah, if we understand the reasoning behind our own thoughts of a person and then we see exactly where they've come from, it can have so much of an impact in various places.
Yeah, completely agree.
So you don't put a label on what Iris is going through. Can
Mm.
you talk about your decision here?
Yeah, I basically didn't want this to be like an exploration of a particular mental illness because my main thing was that I actually just wanted this to be her story and actually not really talking about the mental illness, but just talking about her story. But regardless of that, I also think that maybe a variety of people in different situations might be able to relate to different aspects of things that she experiences and goes through. And if I label it, then it's basically me just saying, like, this is a story about this, and these people can relate to it, and everyone else is something else. Whereas I'm just talking about generally like what it feels not to feel great in your own mind and feel uncomfortable in the world, basically.
Yeah, if you label something, then people might, who had previously been emphasizing and relating, might go, oh, actually, this isn't about me.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So I suppose this is kind of summing up what we've said so far, but why is it important, do you think, or to you in general, to write stories, I suppose if I say fictional stories in this case, about mental illness?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of like misunderstanding, or I think that there's so much misunderstanding around like mental illness, even just from the fact that we can't see it. There's already a trust issue there in a lot of people where they're like, oh, that is that person making it up? Are they actually just doing this because they want attention, or like they can't be bothered to go to work, or there can be so much misunderstanding there. And yeah, I think it can actually create a lot of animosity in just society. And I think that also people are less likely to see that in themselves because they are looking at their own lives and thinking, oh, like nothing really bad has happened to me. So like this thing I'm feeling is not worthy of like help, or this is just who I am. But yeah, I think talking about it and realizing that like it doesn't matter what's happened to you, or like if you deserve to have those feelings, if you have them, then you do deserve help, and there is better things on the horizon for you if you want them.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that I really, really loved about your book, you really go into, in an amount that is the right amount for your book effectively, how society shapes us and affects us. And Iris is thinking various things that I think we all think, and we think that no one else thinks, like we're all in the same boat in many ways. Can you talk about this, including the amount that you did about society's effect on us?
Yeah, that is definitely something that I've really wanted to like think about in the book, because I think that this applies to everyone, but even so, more so young people, and also even more so women, we are told that the things that are going to make us happy are these arbitrary goals and aspirations, and we're almost set up to be quite competitive with each other, and our self-worth and happiness are attached to these. Am I better than this person? Or how am I achieving in comparison to other people? Or whatever. And what actually is sad to me is that I think this is for people that are actually struggling most to feel content in their life. Those can be the most tantalizing voices, because if you're not feeling good, the idea of like, okay, well, I don't know what to do, I just feel terrible in my life, can be very overwhelming and just a horrible thing to feel. So actually somebody saying to you, but if you just look like this, or get this job, or get this many likes, or whatever it is, like get a boyfriend, you'll feel happy. That can be quite a relaxing thought, even if those things are quite hard to get. It gives you like a drive and a purpose, and you think, oh, I'll just feel good if I can just get these things. So yeah, that's obviously really like what Iris thinks in the beginning of the book. But personally, I think that those things at the most can give you fulfillment or like a bit of a buzz, but they're almost the opposite to feeling just content. And really, true contentment comes from being happy regardless of any of those extra special things in your life. So I really wanted to think about that, because I definitely felt in my own life the pressure of like, what are you achieving, and like what kind of status do you have, or whatever. And I see it so much around.
Yeah, yeah. It makes me think of also all the things that people say about, oh, you've got to be happy with what you've got to be, happiness comes from within, etc., etc. Yeah, all these various things that people talk about. I suppose moving back to what you said about the romance, can you tell us about including George, and George as a character, his role, etc.?
So with George, he is a very lovable character because he is just so innately nice and joyful on the pages of the book, especially in comparison to Iris and even Patrick. And one thing I really wanted to make sure as I was writing him is that like I didn't feel the pressure to give him like an edge or like other side, because I truly believe that there are people out there that are just really nice through and through and very stable people. And there's almost a pressure as a writer to think, oh, people are going to think that these characters are two-dimensional if I don't give them like a bit of an edge or complexity in that way. But I really believe that George is a realistic person, and so I wanted him to be this very stable, loving person. And then the other aspect about him that was really important is that he is almost opposite to Iris in the way that he like navigates the world. He's very content and can live completely in the moment and get joy from just the everyday things around him, enjoys cooking and eating and just like feels happy just from being alive, whereas she struggles to find any joy in the everyday, and also just like she thinks about the world in such a large and existential way that she can't make her mind present in the way that he can. And so their relationship is supposed to be this complex thing of he's so good for her because he can show her that happiness comes from these small things and he can look after her and be there for her, but also a frustration there of they're so different, they can't really relate to each other, and it actually might make her feel quite alone in the world because he doesn't understand her at all. And also he's not maybe in a very nice relationship because he's in a relationship with somebody who isn't like appreciating him and giving him back the joy that he gives to them. So their relationship's supposed to be frustratingly nearly perfect, but actually not good at all.
Oh, I love that. Well, obviously it's Iris's narrative, so we hear from her, but we hear everything from her. We haven't got any sort of outside opinions where people might go, oh, someone isn't good enough for someone. We haven't got that. But I mean, something you said realistic, and I loved that George, there came a point in the novel where I was like, yes, he's really realistic. You know, you've got your stereotypical romance storylines where the guy is really great, but whilst yours was really great, you just really did hone in on making him someone that you can absolutely believe in.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really, really loved that, and I really appreciated it as well, that he was so lovely and also so realistic.
That's like the best compliment, because it was a bit of a worry when I was writing that people were going to be like, nobody is as nice as him, or like nobody would stay with her because she's so miserable. But you know, I think that George would stay with her and he would be this loving, nice guy. Like, yeah, I do think that he would do that.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you about the endings later, but I definitely loved. I was hoping that they would get back together, you know. Yeah. So that was good. So Patrick, then, I'm going to have to ask about him. Can you, I suppose, similarly tell us about including Patrick?
Yeah, so basically, as I was saying right at the beginning about this idea of using love as a way to feel good in yourself when your life isn't going well or you're not feeling happy and content. With George, she's using that kind of love because it's so unconditional that she can just completely be herself, and she is almost looked after by him, and like, so that is exactly what she needs at that point. And yet Patrick offers her something completely different and equally as tempting for her in this down state that she's in. And what he offers her is basically like an unconditional type of love, and basically saying that like, I will like you if you are the best version of yourself. And that reignites her motivation to try and get up in the morning and make herself look good. And it gives her something to think about in the day-to-day that isn't just when she's with George, she's just lying in bed. When she's with Patrick, she's thinking, how can I get him to like me? And it actually distracts her from like the horrible thoughts. But then on the flip side, because the thing that brings them together is probably the fact that they both are a bit uncomfortable in the world, that means that Patrick can't be there for her because he needs someone there for him in the same way. He needs a George in a way. And so when they're both not feeling good, the relationship breaks down because, yeah, he can't offer her the support she needs. So really what I wanted to say is that neither of them are going to work for the purpose that she's looking for, which is to kind of make herself feel better.
Yeah. I wrote down a couple of lines about Patrick because it solidified what you were saying as well. And yeah, I've got 2 lines. You put, of Patrick, someone who likes me for who I can be rather than loves me for who I am. And I also noted, it's easy for him to like me when he's the only one with problems, which was quite, yeah.
She's drawn to him because she's finally met someone that actually understands her, whereas George doesn't understand her at all. And yet, because he understands her, that means that he doesn't have the capability to just just be there and support her happily like George can, no matter what. He's unreliable in that way.
Hmm. Yeah, no, it was a fascinating exploration. How much of a role would you say does Iris's upbringing and her parents have on her mental health?
Yeah, so basically, with the inclusion of her family and her parents, I was trying to do almost like two completely opposing things at the same time. One of them is to show that, as we can already see in her day-to-day life, that nothing is actually like going that badly. If anything, things are going pretty well. But seeing her parents, we also see that she's had a pretty nice, stable upbringing. She doesn't get on with them particularly well, or like they don't understand her, but they're obviously well-meaning parents, and she's been privileged in a lot of ways. So that is really to show, again, different from Patrick, that she has no reason to like be feeling down. There isn't this trauma that has happened to her that is causing these feelings. But then at the same time, I also wanted to show the fact that basically the way she has been brought up in this kind of small suburban way, she's been watching her parents, specifically her mum, and noticing that her mum isn't really that happy in her life. And how Iris has originally interpreted that is that, oh, it's because of this small suburban life and just boring relationship. And that's what has made her strive against that and just want this exciting, glamorous kind of London life. And then towards the end of the book, she's more realizing that she has more in common with her mum than maybe she realized. And actually, maybe the reason her mum wasn't fully happy is because, much like Iris, she hasn't had the room to feel whole herself or like get a full identity for herself before she was just put in a life and put in a role that she just kind of living that life, just how Iris was living her glamorous life without just feeling like content before that. And so then Iris is learning from her afresh the second time that she goes home that, oh, maybe it wasn't actually my parents' relationship that is so unappealing, but more just actually the frame of mind that the mum was in.
Yeah, because Iris does struggle when she goes home. You can tell that she really doesn't want to go home. With the mum, the way that she speaks to Iris, I did wonder if the criticism was maybe getting to Iris and maybe there was more to it that we would find out.
Yeah, they do have like a very tense relationship. And I think that because I kind of wanted to get across this thing of, even though Iris only has her like full on breakdown, you see that happen during the book. There is this element of maybe even before, when she was living at home and growing up, she wasn't fully, there's always been something kind of uncomfortable within her, and how she just interpreted that as a young adult or teenager was that, oh, the reason I don't feel good is because I don't like this life. I don't like being here with these people, and I'm going to be happy once I change everything and go live in London and have a really exciting life. But yeah, she begins to realize that that isn't the case, basically.
Yeah, she does always think about, I don't want to move back and everything. Yeah, it's got to be far, far away. Would you say that Iris's mum will be happier now with the decisions that have been made?
I think like the reason the book ends quite close to just like things changing rather than us seeing what happens after that things have changed, is because it can really go a lot of ways. And I think that life is a bit too complicated almost to say that like, oh, Iris would be happy now and her mum would be happy now, or like, those were the right decisions. I think that the really important thing is that they both had like a change in frame of mind, and that will hopefully help them in the rest of their life to create something that they feel happier in. But the same applies to the mum as it does with Iris. Of, I don't know if they will be happier with George and her husband, or single, or with somebody else, or whatever. It could be so many different ways, but like it's the change in mind that was the most important, rather than like the actual change in life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, where they're going isn't so important as where they are now
Yeah.
and what's happened. Yeah, interesting. Okay. So, go on then. The ending. We'll go there. The ending, I believe it changed along the way. Can you tell us about the different endings you wrote, the different thoughts you had, etc.?
Yeah, the ending in some ways hasn't changed dramatically, but it kind of has. It feels dramatically different because of where I chose to end it rather than like what actually happens in my mind. And at first, as I said, this was the first thing I ever wrote, and the whole book was slightly different, but like I guess it was a bit earlier in the way that it was a more sad ending. I think at that point I really wanted to just focus on the kind of cyclical nature sometimes of mental illness, where you feel like something has made you feel better and then actually that thing hasn't made you feel better. But editing it with my agent, that having a hopeful ending, considering the book is quite like dark already, would probably be a better place to end it. And actually, once like we kind of settled on that, I thought that that was a really good idea, because that is actually truly what I think. I don't think that like if you're mentally ill, you'll be mentally ill forever and it's just this bleak, like horrible thing. So I was really happy with that change and adding on a little bit more story. I think basically why I was reluctant to put that in at the beginning is because as it ends now, she goes to the doctor. But as you know, I don't like put in a diagnosis or like a particular term. And when I first started writing it, I felt really resistant to putting even the fact that she goes to the doctor in the book, because I was scared it like medicalizes the feelings that she was having. What I've come to realize is that like my point still is that she does need help and support in whatever way it manifests for her or different people. I do believe that she does need help. So just to choose one element of that, and in this case, it was her going to the doctor, I think that that's fine. And I was happy to change the ending to that.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, again, it leaves it very realistic, doesn't it? That things aren't all hunky-dory. Like you said, it's cylindrical, it will come back around, you'll think you're okay, and then things can come crashing down. Yeah. It's not as hopeful ending. Where exactly in the book is that, if it's still there exactly?
It's not, yeah, so the everything's a little bit different, but it would be more, yeah, so I guess an equivalent place where it would have ended is that in the books currently she gets back with George, and so in a way that's happy, but then we see that she is still depressed and like is still not feeling good. And I think that like I wanted to end it there to show that there was an imperfect thing of she is going into this relationship with a better way of thinking about it now, and she doesn't see it as the cure for her problems, but she's still going to feel like depressed because she still is not feeling good. So yeah, I wanted to like end it there to just show that. But obviously now I've added in this extra where she's actually like going to get help, which I actually now think is a very important part of the book, because a lot of people don't like some of the more unlikable things that Iris does during the book, and thinks that me writing it is almost like excusing that behavior. But I think by the ending, what I'm trying to say as well is that like the least we can do is at least take responsibility for ourselves. And so if the way we're acting isn't nice because we're not feeling good, that isn't an excuse, but we should be like looking to get better or find help in that way.
You're writing how she's feeling, so sometimes our thoughts aren't going to be brilliant, but it's truthful to write that. Yeah, I wasn't sure how exactly to, I'm going to say categorize, although we're not, I completely agree with you, let's not label, but at the same time I suppose it's the easiest way to explain it, because we have got Iris, who is sometimes, I think she can be completely reliable, and sometimes obviously you're aware she's not going to be. How should we feel about Sara?
She is actually quite a classical character in the way that I'm not really saying anything new by talking about this like kind of competitive female relationship where you're supposed to be friends, but actually you are seeing each other as competition. And part of the enjoyment of the friendship almost comes from competing with each other and like trying to work out which one of you is better or more successful or in whatever way. But towards the end of the book, and I did want to kind of give a hint towards the idea that Sara, we don't know exactly like what's going in her mind, but like she might be in a, I'm not saying she is going through the exact same thing as Iris, but basically if somebody is acting in this way that both Iris and Sara are acting in, then it's probably because they're not actually feeling that great in themselves, and there is like insecurities there. And also, I wanted to show with their friendship that Iris is supposed to see her as almost like a best friend, but actually they're barely friends at all. And, you know, at the beginning of the book, it was supposed to be this idea of just because you have people in your life, there's a difference between like just having a relationship with somebody and having a close relationship. And that difference is really important. And so some people might feel quite lonely and not realize why. It's because they have these very superficial relationships with people around them. And so by the end of the book, Iris is learning to not want that type of relationship anymore and want a closer relationship with girls. She kind of sees when she goes on that night out, she sees those two other girls and thinks that, oh yeah, maybe I would like a more like honest relationship with a friend.
Yeah, that was Chloe and Shauna, wasn't it? Yeah,
Yeah.
that was an interesting one because obviously seeing it through Iris's head, I was thinking, oh, they seem all right, and then later, oh, okay, you know, they're really good friends and that. Can you see yourself maybe, or is there scope, do you think, for Sara to have her own novel?
To be honest, yeah, like, I mean, I wouldn't write it necessarily, but the truth is that maybe it wouldn't even be that different to this. I haven't thought about Sara's life to like such a deep extent that like I don't think that she is mentally ill like Iris, but I think that she is a kind of representation of how even the women who aren't feeling actually diagnosably mentally ill still struggle with this idea that we're supposed to just look amazing and be really thin and be really successful, but also be really nice and be like all of these different things at once. And also at the same time, not even be competitive with other people, like just be doing it secretly. Like, oh, I just happen to be better than all the other girls, but I'm not even trying to be. So she's kind of like supposed to be a bit more of like a representation of that. But it's funny that you say that because now I'm thinking her story is more likely to be almost more of like a Maya rest and relaxation of like she is really coming from like the super privileged side of things and how that can be depressing in its own way sometimes.
Yeah, no, I think because I enjoyed how you had written Iris's story so much, I just got to the end of the book and I thought I really want to read this for Sara. You said about privilege there. Can you talk about that for a moment? But Iris's, I suppose you could say, lack of privilege and the differences that she's got in her life.
Yeah, I think that like I wanted Iris to be this very specific level. I'm not writing something like a Sara where I'm saying that like she has everything and she's still like depressed in that way where I'm saying things mean nothing. But at the same time, I want Iris to have a pretty comfortable life where there isn't like any reason for her to not be feeling good. And if anything, things are actually going well in pretty much every aspect. She has been looks nice and people like her and she has enough money to live and she has a good job and her parents are together and she has a lot going on, but none of it is like extreme wealth or anything. I would still say that Iris is a pretty privileged person, but she just, in comparison to like the extreme wealth of Sara, it isn't as much. But it's supposed to be a level of like, you think that this life would be enough to make someone happy, and yet for some reason it isn't.
Hmm. You said about we said about continuing Iris's story in that, you know, it ends where it does, etc., not really thinking further because that's the importance is what happens in the book. Do you have any idea? Have you thought? Can we assume that Patrick's life is going to get better?
Yeah, so that's interesting because as we see him last, we haven't got any impression that he has had a change in mind in terms of like maybe needing help. The difference between Iris and Patrick, which is something quite important to their difference, and yet also in some ways not important, but it is important that he has had a reason to not feel good and he's had loads of struggles and lots of things go wrong in his life. So he will have to go through a very different journey to Iris to feel better, and they're both hard in different ways. But I feel positive that he will hopefully have a life. A lot of people think of him as a very toxic person or like they don't like that relationship, and I completely understand that. But it's funny that I didn't actually write it to be as toxic as maybe people are feeling when they read it, because I feel sympathy for Patrick as well. And so in my head, I just think this is two people that are not meant to be together and are together at a bad time. And he's struggling. And maybe because from his point of view, you would just think Iris was a toxic person, or I guess she is anyway, a bit. But yeah, I think that he just needs help and probably as well just getting older, because he is doing a similar thing to Iris. We're just thinking that this glamorous London life where you're just going out and living life to a bit of excess is going to be the thing that makes them happy, when actually maybe it's not going to be. But I hope that there's positive things for him on the horizon as well.
Yeah, no, I fully hold up my hand. For a long time, I thought he was toxic.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, you get towards the end and you go, okay, things are changing. This is going to sound potentially, I don't know because I don't know your answer. It's going to be potentially out of left field, and that's why I've left it towards the end. Can you talk about the way you incorporate the passing of months and seasons?
Oh, That's interesting. I, funnily enough, with questions like this, the honest truth is that like I wasn't doing anything purposefully, really, because of the way I was writing it. It just all came out and it was very natural. So I'm almost like retrospectively analyzing my decisions. But I guess like the way that time passes and months passes in the book is supposed to be a bit reflective of her mental state and the way that like depression or not feeling good can make time feel very uncomfortable and very strange. Sometimes it feels like months are moving like that and life is getting away from you and you haven't done anything for like 5 months. And sometimes it can feel like every second passing is like 5 hours and like how are you even going to get through the day? And so I wanted to get that across in the book about sometimes we just see her life in quite a lot of detail from a short period of time. And then sometimes time passes really fast because that's like how it feels to her, that it isn't just this, okay, each day passing, plodding a long way. It's kind of uncomfortable, the feeling of time to her. So that's probably how I was trying to write it. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah. No, it was interesting because I never once wondered where we were in a year. Often you will read a book sometimes, and if it's not included, you're like, oh, is it summer? And you just wonder to help you kind of immerse yourself. Never got that with your book. Definitely, I remember knowing it was autumn, and autumn lasted a good amount of time, a believable amount of time. And then I knew, because she'd take the jacket off or she'd put a jacket on, she'd comment on the leaves. Yeah, so I wondered if it was in your mind when you were including it like that.
One thing that actually hearing you say that is really interesting, that hopefully maybe that I am getting across, is that I tend to feel like depression and like low moods are really associated with coldness and winter and raining and everything. But I actually think that the worst time to feel low is in the summer, and it can be really like jarring to feel so down and like hear everyone else like shrieking and having fun and lying around in the sun and like wearing little outfits. And summer is such a time of happiness that it feels more jarring when you're not feeling that along with other people. So the middle part of the book where things are really intense takes part over summer because the way everyone else is acting is impacting her. I wanted to talk about that basically.
No, that's a very good point. Yeah, it's certainly a lot more obvious in summer. Life and people living is a lot more obvious for all the reasons you've said. Yeah.
Yeah, true. You see people more because they're just out of the house. And so, like, everything is more comparison to you. Everyone just seems very happy in summer, even though probably loads of people aren't. Everyone seems more miserable because they're all cold in winter walking around. And then you can really feel the distance between you and other people in summer more if you're not feeling good.
Yeah. You're making me think of seasonal affective disorder that everybody says is about the cold weather and the winter weather. And then there are people who experience it in summer as well.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, no, it was a surprise to me. I mean, I've got a bit of it with the winter. I definitely prefer summer, but it happens
Oh,
then as well.
that's really interesting.
So Everyone I Know Is Dying was book one of a two-book deal, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Can you tell us about your second book?
Yeah, so that comes out in September and it's similar in some ways. A lot of the themes or like topics are similar. So it talks about mental health and romantic relationships and the female experience and just modern life. But the kind of structure of everything about the book actually, I think, feels quite different in the way that it's actually third person past tense and it's from two points of view, a girl and a boy, and it spans 20 years rather than 1 year. So it's from them being 8 years old to 28. And yeah, it's about these two characters that are struggling to feel accepted into the world or like comfortable in the world, and then how they find each other twice over their life and how their relationship together impacts that feeling of discomfort in the world. And again, funnily, probably the thing that actually made me want to write the book, I don't know if it comes across that strongly as one of the main themes, but I wanted to start it when they're quite younger because I wanted to explore the fact that I think things that happen to you when you're young and in your teenage years, even when they're not like really extreme things, can have like long lasting impacts on you. And so, it's not like talking about trauma or like anything, but just like how you are perceived in the world and how you feel in the world when you're a teenager can just hugely impact everything that happens afterwards. And so that was like one of the main things that I was thinking about when I was writing it. I found it really just interesting to write from a teenage perspective and a child perspective as well, because it made me reflect on my own life and just thinking like, I don't have a particularly good memory. And so it was actually interesting to reflect on my own life and think, what are the moments that stood out? And then once I started to like think about them, I realized, oh, the reason that I have remembered these things is probably because they have actually had a big impact on me, even if they're not hugely crazy things, they have actually impacted how I see the world and how I think, quite importantly, how you think other people see you is almost like still living with you, your teenager self. Your insecurities that you get as a teenager linger with you as an adult. So I wanted to get that across.
So you've got a change in age range,
Yeah.
and you've also got this difference between having two narratives rather than one. Has this, or how has this changed how you explore topics? Has this had an impact on that?
Yeah, it was fun to like with Everyone I Know Is Dying. She goes home and you see a bit of her home life. I really wanted to focus on like what it just feels like to be her in that moment, in that year. And then it's kind of like the complete opposite of just like exploring the lasting impacts of just like things that have happened to you over your life. And I just think that, yeah, the way you feel towards the characters from knowing them so deeply like you do in Everyone I Was Dying within one moment or from over a long period of time, it gives you a different feeling towards the characters. And it was fun to write that because in a way, I actually think, I mean, these characters are just a bit more likable in themselves, but like, I still think that people tend to maybe have a bit more like empathy or like strength of feeling towards people, even if they're fake people, that they've known over like a long period of time. Whereas with Everyone I Know Is Dying, it was hard to maybe get people to feel empathetic towards her when you're just straight in the deep end and like you don't even know her. You're like, well, why should I feel sorry for her when I don't know who this person is? But it was easier to create that feeling over a longer period of time, I felt.
Yeah, okay, this is definitely going to be an interesting read. I can't wait to read this one. Emily, thank you so much for coming here today. It has been wonderful. Reading your book has been an experience that I don't think I'm going to forget. Yeah, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. That was so fun and interesting.
I do hope you enjoyed this episode. Do join me next time. And if you have a moment to spare, please do leave a rating and/or review of this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Podcast Addict. Thank you. Authors Afterword, episode 127, was recorded on the 16th of April and published on the 25th of August, 2025. Music and production by Charlie Place.